Well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Hope you come back often and tell your friends about us. I have one announcement right quick. We do need some help on the technical side of our shows. TC needs some help. Ed needs some help. And if you are knowledgeable about Zoom or YouTube and would like to help us produce the shows, we sure would like to hear from you. And you can email our website, newtracksmodeling.com or newtracksmodeling@gmail.com, and we'll get in touch with you. But any help you could give us, we'd appreciate it. I now want to introduce Scott Thornton. Scott's a partner along with Michael Peterson, Nathan Holmes from Iowa Scaled Engineering. They're the developer of Proto Throttle, which makes your diesel engines. You can run them exactly like the prototype does. And they also make a variety of electrical products as well as model drainage pipes and grain bins to enhance your model railroad. So Scott has a short video that he'd like to show us this evening. And Scott, I appreciate you being here and thank you so much for coming.
Well, thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. I will get this video going and you guys can enjoy it. And then it's kind of a synopsis of a lot of the products that Iowa Scaled Engineering produces. And then afterwards, if anyone has any comments or questions, I think we have just a minute or two to address anything if anybody has any thoughts. So I'll get her going here. Hang on.
Iowa Scaled Engineering, manufacturing a variety of products designed to enhance your experience with your layout and get the most out of your hobby time and budget. Featuring Train Spotter, rock-solid train detection. Train spotters make the detection of locomotives or rolling stock easy and reliable, with no time-consuming installation or frustrating adjustments. Based on modern technology, they work in a variety of lighting conditions, be it completely dark or under full lights with no false triggering. Available in both a discrete under-track version or easy across-the-track style, this low-profile sensor solves many of the challenges that plague other optical detectors. Sound bites. Simple sounds for your layout in the palm of your hand. Sound bites are fully self-contained modules that provide ambient sounds to complement your models. The Sound Bites grade crossing bell offers a variety of mechanical and modern warning signals. There's an option available regardless of your model era, scale, or location. Plus, the compact size and easy setup ensures that even the novice hobbyist can be up and running in no time. The Motorman, fully automated train operations. The Motorman is an automatic reversing train shuttle controller providing hands-free operation for both DC and DCC locomotives. Working with our train spotter detectors, the Motorman will continuously drive a train back and forth, automatically stopping and reversing at the end of track and intermediate stations. With complete control of the speed, direction, and other settings, a fully customized experience can be created. The Proto Throttle, a prototypically accurate wireless control stand that's a revolution in diesel control. The Proto Throttle realistically mimics a standard EMD control stand to put you right inside the cab of your locomotive. Featuring a fully detented throttle and reverser, spring-loaded horn, bell button, a brake handle with proportional response, as well as fully customizable lighting controls and more. The Proto Throttle interfaces with all major DCC systems and can easily adapt to your personal operating preferences. Plus, grain belt models, realistic 3D designs for your layout. Grain belt models uses the latest in 3D printing and fabrication to create high-quality agricultural structures and details for your layout. Featuring grain bins and culverts in multiple scales and sizes, each with a realistic galvanized steel appearance, accurate corrugations, and side sheet heights, and available in a wide range of diameters and scales. Plus, the simplified construction process ensures less time at the workbench and more time at the layout. For more information on our entire product lineup, visit iascaled.com. Iowa Scaled Engineering, electronics made easy.
I trust that came through okay.
It came through great. Thank you so very much. Anybody
Yeah.
have any questions for Scott?
I have a comment. This is Ted Becker. I ordered 11 of your train spotters a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
And of the first 3 I've tried to install, there's benchwork members in the way. So, not your problem, but I'm looking forward to getting them in use because they seem like a great product.
Yeah, the trade spotters, I use them on my own layout, and they're like our tagline. They're pretty rock solid. So did you get the standard ones, Ted? The ones that are just about 3 inches in height, or did you get there's an optional flexible one too?
I got the ones that are just that have just the IR chip and a couple of capacitors. And I'm going to be interfacing to an Arduino through a SparkFun I2C multiplexer into an Arduino. So
Okay.
yeah, I emailed you about power supply. I don't remember about how to generate the 3.3 volts, and I have regulators on order for that. So
Okay. Well, great. Thanks.
oh, I wanted to comment. I had one set up on the bench, and I wanted to check it for ambient light, and I shined my LED flashlight directly into it from like an inch away. Didn't, no false detection or anything. They are really rock solid in terms of ambient light.
That's good to hear. Anybody else?
I can make a quick comment because I've seen the proto throttle and it's very impressive.
Oh, thanks, Paul.
My God, this is turning into a love fest.
Well, if you've used his throttles, you'll understand.
Yeah.
I operate on one of our club members' home layouts, and he has 5 of them with another one on order, and they are just fantastic. It's so much better than just twirling dials.
Makes it very realistic. The only thing is I run a few steam locomotives.
Well, listen, if somebody, Scott, if you or somebody that uses these proto throttles would like to come back and be on the show and have a longer time, I'd love to have you come back because I'd love to see one of these things in actual operation. If it's as good as Greg is talking about it is, I think a lot of people could benefit from using it.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to come back, Jim, because I can, I could stream from my mobile phone, and I could just show you how I put an engine on my layout through its paces. So you guys might find that interesting.
I think that'd be fantastic. I'll make arrangements. I'll get in touch with you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate allowing us to play our little video. And if you have any questions, you can just log on to the website, iascaled.com. And thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Scott. All right, now I'd like to turn to Paul Thompson for the quick tip of the evening.
Thank you, Jim. Let me just get my screen up here if I can find out how to get. Hang on. I can't get to my regular computer screen. down this thing?
Well, while you're playing with that, let me talk about two other things right quick. Number one, I know at least one person who normally gets the emails about coming to the live Zoom session did not get an email. So to that person and to anybody else that didn't get an email, you need to register at our new website, newtracksmodeling.com. And if you will register at the website, then you will get automatically get the emails. This is a new site. We were having some trouble with in the past with the old site getting people emails, but this one I'm told is foolproof. So if you'll register, you will get an email. And to the one person that I sent the email to, I hope you got it and I hope you're able to attend. The next My Bill segment is going to be on May 29th with Chris Course moderating it. And we're having a special My Build on March the 31st, only for those modelers who are building Greg Cassidy's Conowingo model. So that'll be a special one just for those modelers. And the modelers that attend that and show their model that they built from the kit have an opportunity to win a prize from Conowingo Models. So I hope that you'll join us and show your model on that date. Paul, you got your computer working?
Yeah, I was in a full screen and I couldn't find the share screen.
Okay.
Okay, so tonight's tip is something that plagues a few of us now and again, and it's front couplers for equipment that basically you don't use. For example, here I've got a Doodlebug front coupler, and if you'll notice, I managed to mount a Sargent coupler, which is more to scale, although it sticks out a little bit too much for my liking, but that's a lot better than having a bulky coupler at the front, such as a KD, which is on the other end of this thing. Now, the reason I mentioned this is steam locomotives. This is one that I did actually, I'll bet you it goes back 40 years. And you'll see I mounted a KD coupler, but I have to be very careful with this thing because it's a brass locomotive and that coupler will short out if I put it with the wrong equipment. The other thing too is the pin hangs down and you're not seeing that one?
We're seeing your face. That's all I'm seeing.
I'm saying the locomotive. That's all I'm seeing.
Yeah,
I
I'm
see
seeing
the
okay too.
I see the 441 locomotive.
Yeah, 411. I've got the 411 up, so I'm not sure what's wrong with your feed. Anyway, I'll continue on here because what I just wanted to point out that we have various options today that make this a little bit better. And these are various couplers that you can mount on the front. The bottom is a KD. The middle one is a really nifty idea if you've got a plastic knuckle coupler. That takes care of the insulating problem. Then you've got a scale head coupler, and then right at the top there, you've got a scale coupler, which is made by Sargent, or could be a dummy coupler, but I wanted one that worked. And this gives you a little more example of what you can do. The one on the left is a number 5 KD. The one on the right is a scale head coupler, and you can see the difference. So if you're looking for something to enhance your look and you don't actually need to use the coupler, think about putting on a scale head or even a dummy. And that's my tip for the night. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Paul, what happens if it's the other direction?
Well, that's the other end of the car. I mean, you put on a regular coupler. This is like a coupler that you would never use, say the front of a snowplow, although sometimes you could use that. But you have to make that decision. Like you're not going to put a dummy coupler on the front of a switching locomotive, but you could on a mainline locomotive because you're never going to use that front coupler.
No, what I was talking about was I got the old Mantua General, which doesn't have a coupler on the front, and I want to add a coupler to the front.
That could be tricky. A General isn't a big locomotive either.
Well,
So,
neither is my layout. It's 8 foot long.
Yeah.
You might look at parts from somebody like Bachman for some of their, because they sell like the front assembly, I know in the ON30 as a separate piece.
Mhm.
And you may find a part from someone that would fit from some other manufacturer and replace that has room for a coupler.
Yeah, if you actually want a working coupler on a locomotive like the General, that's going to be a little tricky because it's got a long cow catcher.
Yeah, I
Okay,
was hoping for an easy one.
moving right along, we now need to go to keep the show moving. I'm sorry, Ed. Paul, thank you so much. I want to turn to Greg Cassidy and Chris, of course, to talk about their build along with one of Chris's kits from Conowingo Models. So Greg, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Let me get my screen share up. Chris, I assume if you want to say anything, you can say it at the end.
I'll be waiting for the dancing girls.
You've missed them already. All right. Welcome. My name's Greg Cassidy. This is the first New Tracks build along. I call it the first one because Jim has lined up a number of other build alongs following this one, and I'm excited to see all of them. This one is the collaborative build of Conowingo Models Gray Street House Company House version. Tonight, which is part 4, we'll be installing the windows and doors, assembling the building and the porch. And as always, I'll be covering techniques that any modeler may know, but here's what I'm doing with this kit. First part we're going to tackle is windows. We need to keep the drafts out. So once you have your walls and your windows painted, as we did in the last session, it's time to put some glass in those windows. Now, the easy way to do this, of course, is you just put a piece of acetate behind the wall window openings like I have here, and then put the windows in place. I've seen modelers do that. I've done it a couple of times when I was in a hurry, but it's kind of the lazy way. It's your kit. You can if you want to, but I prefer to put the glass in the windows. It looks better. So I'll be showing you how to install Tichy acetate into Tichy windows, which is what comes with this kit. Once you cut them off of the sprue that carries them, you need to cut the little tabs off and get it flush with the edge of the window. I use a little knife to do this and just scrape it along the edge. The goal of this is to make sure that it fits inside the window frame. It needs to fit all the way in there. Then when I go to glue them in place, I use Tamiya extra thin cement. It's really nice, and it comes with this little plastic applicator. If you just touch it to the corner of the window when it's in place, the glue wicks underneath using capillary action, and it's fun to watch it happen. Once you have all your glass installed in the windows, it's time to put the windows and doors into the walls. I will usually use an ACC glue for this, but other glues will work. You need to keep in mind that you're gluing 2 different materials, a plastic and a wood. Once you have all your windows in place, we're not quite done. We want to be able to cover those windows. Some modelers like to assemble the model and then put the windows in place. Personally, I prefer to work on my walls when they're flat. If I'm putting windows and doors in, or if I'm putting any signs on, I'd rather do that before it's assembled. We don't want any peeping Toms, so we're going to deal with some window covers here. Now, with the kit comes some manila cardstock. You can use that to put some blinds on your windows. They're easy to just cut and glue in place. I prefer to put curtains into houses if I'm building them. I've gotten all my curtain images off of the web. You can find ones that you like. Doesn't really matter what the window or the wall looks like. All you're going to be using is the curtain material. Once you've decided what you're going to put in what window, you just cut out the middle. If the curtains are already closed, it doesn't matter. You just cut them in half. And then you glue them behind the windows. You can have them mostly closed or mostly open. You need to keep in mind that you may have to work around some bracing or something. You can just use white glue a little bit on the top or on the side here to hold them in place. I also like to think of the rooms I'm putting the curtains in. If you have a corner room, well, it would typically have the same curtains on all the windows. So you want to make sure that your front and side windows, if they're supposed to be for the same room, will match. Excuse me. Next, we'll move on to assembling. I'm going to show you a couple ways of attaching the 1/16 inch corner trim. The first method is where you will apply the corner trim before you actually assemble the building. In this case, I'm using blocks to hold the corner trim in place after they've been glued while they dry. And you want to make sure that your corner trim is flush with the back of the wall. When I put my corner trim in, I try to make it flush to the bottom and let it extend a little bit at the top. If it extends on both ends, that's not a problem either. You're going to be trimming where it extends beyond the wall. In this case, I matched the roof line. And also for this particular kit, the trim on the second story back window, you need to trim the bottom as well to fit in the notch. Now, the second way to attach trim is to put your walls together first, build your structure, and then put the trim in afterwards. If you're using this method, you need to make sure that your walls are matching up just right so that the trim will fit in that slot. Now we'll be assembling the walls. I always like this part because that's when the structure is really coming together. I'll usually glue together 2 sub-assemblies, depending on how complex the kit is, but in this case, we're just talking about 4 walls. So I'll use blocks to hold them in place and hold them at a 90-degree angle. In this case, I'm using method 1. You can see that the corner trim is already in place on the edges of some of the walls. Then once those 2 sub-assemblies are done, I'll glue the sides together and I'll clamp them or use blocks to hold them in place. You'll want to watch for any glue that squeezes out around the joints and remove that. This is gluing another set of walls together. I use another 90-degree angle here to make sure they're right before I put the blocks in place to hold them. In this case, you can see it's method 2, where we don't have the corner trim attached to the walls yet. Once I have those 2 halves ready to go together, I'll glue them together, again, making sure I have room for my corner trim. Then once the walls are glued together, I'll glue the corner trim in place. And like before, I'll let it extend a little bit beyond the roof line. Then I'll go ahead and cut the trim flush with the roof line. One thing I like to do as well is bevel the edges of my walls if they're going to meet a roof at an angle. That way the roof will sit flush. You can do this with either a sanding stick. I'll often do it with the wall on my Ultimation sander once I have the walls put together.
Greg, let me
Yes.
interrupt. Let me ask you a question.
Uh-huh.
What determines whether you put the trim boards in before or after?
I'd like to say it's how you've planned on putting the kit together, but once or twice I've started gluing the walls together before I put the trim in place because I was so excited and wanted to move ahead with it. Both ways work. I think modelers might find a way they like better. I will usually put the trim in place first when I remember to, because that way when I'm gluing the second wall in place, I have a little more area that I can apply the glue to hold everything together. But it's not a big enough difference that it really matters. It's just the way I usually go, but I've done it both ways.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. And now this is another thing that I will tend to do. It's not part of the kit, but I'll usually put a ridge pole in on the roof of kits that I put together. It's just an extra structural feature that I like to put in. It gives you a place to glue more of the roof to. It makes the kit a little bit stronger. You'll also see in the one photo where I have it sitting on the bracing. When we were talking about the bracing in module 2, I showed where I was going to leave space for a ridge pole, and that's what it's for there. Next, we'll move on to assembling the porch. You're going to measure and cut your porch boards. You want to have them overhang a little bit. I'll be covering how we're going to build the O-scale porch at the end of this segment. Before I do any finishing to them, I'll stick them to a piece of tape. I usually try and chew up the outer ends if it's a porch that needs to look weathered. These are the ends that would be exposed if the porch isn't quite sheltering them. And then one of the methods that I'll stain them with is by putting a stain on them, and then after it dries, about 15 minutes later, I'll come back and put a little bit more just on the outer ends where they would be more exposed. A second way of doing that is to use 2 different stains. In this case, I applied a lighter stain to them first, and then come back with a darker stain, and again, just put that on the outer edges so that they look like they've weathered a little bit more out there. This is what they come out looking like. And in these, I ended up chewing up the ends after I had stained them. Again, that's just because I forgot to do it beforehand. Once you're done with those and they're dry, you can start applying the glue and gluing the porch boards onto the porch assembly. You want to leave a little bit of space between them and try to sort the boards so that you get some variety. You're going to have different wood and it would weather differently. This is what it looks like once they're all down. You can also use your knife and maybe break a board so it looks like it's a little more worn. You could have a missing board if you wanted to have it really look like it was deteriorated. So once we have the porch boards in place, it's time to glue the house onto the base. What I will do is run a bead of glue around the foundation or the bottom walls of the house. And then once you have it lined up and make sure that your overhang is equal on all sides, you can glue it down. And double check it when you're putting it down to make sure that it's even and you don't have any glue that's squeezing out. If you do have some, you can remove it with a toothpick or a wet brush, and then you'll want to weight it or clamp it while it dries. Once it's dried to the foundation, this is the point where I'll add a view block inside the building. Now, this is something you'd be doing if you're not lighting the building or you're not putting an interior in it. It's just something to keep you from looking through the structure. I cut mine from some of the roofing paper that came. You can use black construction paper, anything that'll keep you from looking through the building. Next, we're going to work on the porch posts. They're cut from the 3/32 strip wood that comes with it. You'll want to make them slightly taller than your front door, and you'll want to cut 3 of them. I'm only showing 2 here because we're going to be attaching these roof supports to them. Now, something that I wanted to do where I deviated slightly, and you don't need to, but it's just something I did, and it's a quick tip to show you how you can use materials that come in the kits. I wanted my porch roof to overhang slightly more than the porch roof supports that came with the kit allowed. Well, I looked at that piece of wood, the upper one that the porch supports were cut out of, and said, well, there's a lot more material there that has the same angle on it. So like the lower piece, I just cut above and below where they were. And then I got 2 pieces that have that same angle, but they're slightly larger. Again, like I say, this isn't necessary, but I just wanted my porch to overhang a little bit more. This is the difference in size with the ones that I cut out behind the ones that were already cut. Once you're assembling them, you want to put a little bit of glue on the very end of the roof support and then glue them to your posts. You want to make sure that as they dry, they keep a 90-degree angle. And you'll also want to glue these with the finished side down. And you'll see why we're doing that. We're going to end up with a little bit of a ledge at the top of the post once we put them in place. So you want to glue it to your porch and to the piece of corner trim that's on your house. Make sure that while you put it in place, it stays at a 90-degree angle. This is what they both look like when they're glued in place. And you can now see the two little ledges on the inside of the posts that were left over. Now, the reason for those ledges is we're going to use the 1/32 by 3/32 trim and put a cross beam across the two posts. You glue those in place and you glue your third middle post in place at the same time. I'll show you what those two little blocks are for in a moment. When I'm gluing these pieces together, just like any other type of outside structure, I'll double check it to make sure stuff is at a right angle and that stuff is sitting level, unless you're really trying to make the building look like it's falling apart. There are times you don't want it to look right, but in this case, I did. Now, those little blocks, I just cut them off of the excess of the posts and glue them on the inside of the roof supports. They just add a little bit of strength there. And since I knew these buildings were going to be handled some, I wanted the porch roof to be strong. It's not necessary, but sometimes I'll do something like that. And once we put the roof on, you won't be able to see them at all. Now, everything that I've shown is for the kit, the HO kit that comes with the supplied porch. I'm going to go over how you can build a foundation and porch for the O-scale kit. It's just the gray street house and it doesn't come with the porch and the foundation. Most of what I've shown up to this point will apply in terms of windows and structure building. But now we're going to go over how to take care of the foundation and porch. You'll need to build a foundation. There'll be a small amount of scratch building involved, but Chris and I have looked and found that this foundation that's available from rail scale models, their RSM D2520, will be a really good choice for building a foundation for the O-scale kit. I recommend that you get two 12-inch strips. You can get them from 3/8 or 1/2 inch high, and 3/16 inch thick should be plenty to hold the house up. You can get these from railscalemodels.com, and I'll have their web link in the chat after the presentation. Now, for making the porch, again, you'll have to do a little bit of scratch building. These photos are from when I built the first one of these, where it didn't have a porch and I scratch built it myself. You'll want to use some of the leftover sheets that the walls came out of for your clapboard roof support. I just drew on the back and cut out a couple of roof supports. You end up with 2 of each size, but you only need to use 1 of each side. And then you're going to measure and cut your floor porch. This is the scribe siding that I had mentioned you would need in the first session if you were building the O-scale model and wanted to put the porch on it. So once you cut your scribe siding, you want to make sure that it and your roof supports are the same measurement so that they'll be able to sit on the post. I glued my roof supports onto the walls, and then I put a cross beam all the way across them just for extra strength. You want to make sure that they're both at the same height on the wall. And after that, you'll be gluing your porch floor onto the foundation. You may need to support it while it dries. It'll be right underneath the front wall. This is what it'll look like when you've got the porch floor and the roof supports glued in place. I didn't have a foundation on this one yet. I added one later, but this is how you could scratch build the porch and the roof supports to fit. And then again, you'll just make your posts out of strip wood. It would probably be something around 3/16, and you'll add a cross brace and a middle post like I have here. This shows you when I was scratch building mine, I actually set the cross brace back a little bit and had it angled at the same angle as the roof supports. So that's it for the construction part. Next week, we'll be talking about putting on the roofs and adding the details. But coming up before we end this, I have some slides that Jeff Bunza is going to talk about if you want to be lighting this. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Okay. There were a bunch of things that as I was building the house, I decided that it wasn't a residential house. It was actually a storage facility for some small business. So one of the things that I changed was the deck in front of the house was going to be more of a loading dock. And instead of the individual boards, I used the remaining material that was left over from the sideboards on the supports for the supposed porch. So that explains the difference in the deck, and it's a little bit wider as well. There will be no covering for it, and you'll see why in a bit. This was actually all motivated by one observation and one decision that I'll get to at the end. The floor is actually a piece of paper, a black piece of paper. That's a piece of paper, not card. I actually colored that black with a magic marker, mounted it, glued it, and trimmed it. So that's what you see there. Next slide. The corner block that I originally had designed was meant to go in the front window corner. Can you go back a slide, Greg? That lower window right corner that you're looking at, yeah, right there. That's where the lighting was going to go. And originally, I had thought to maximize the room behind that. I might have even thought about putting materials in, and decided that I wasn't going to go that direction. So instead of maximizing it, I was going to minimize it. Go to the next slide, please. And minimizing it meant fitting it barely above the windows and all the way to the back. And what it meant for me was instead of using a 3mm LED, I went to a 0603 LED, which I had, which is already pre-wired. And you can see the two wires at the top right there. That is actually the top of the block, which I made out of some spare wood that I had, cut and fit to that corner to minimize the block, not to maximize it. Those wires were fed through a hole that I made. The hole was big enough to put the LED through, and then it needed to be both glued, quote unquote, and fixed, but also it needed to have a light block. So what I did was I took a small piece of wood and shaped it into a point and then jammed it in so it was like a peg. And you can see the top and the bottom of the peg there. And then on the bottom, you see the LED, which was simply turned right angles to be flush with what would wind up being the ceiling of that light block. Next slide, please. The original LED was one of these very bright bluish tint, which you can see mounted and lit on the far left. A little Tamiya clear orange paint on top of the LED turned it from blue to a yellow tint, which I wanted to represent an incandescent light in the room. And then the windows, after they had panes put in them, I shot with dull coat. And I do that, and I hope that you can see a slight difference. It actually it's not a light block, and it doesn't come out looking like a frosted window. It looks like a dirty window when you actually are staring at it, but it distributes the light over the window such that when you light it behind, you really get the effect that the room is lit. So it enhances the lighting in the room. And I have no intention of decorating the inside of it So that was the best I know I was going to do. So that's the effect that I was shooting for. That's the effect I got. And I hope you can see it in that view. Next slide. So why the change? Well, if you look closely, there's no window on the second floor front on the right. On the second floor front on the right, there's actually a door. And that door is a piece of window material that got laser cut out that I reversed and scribed for vertical boards. And that's going to be a door. Now, right now, that's a temporary door. And if you look above it, there's a beam sticking out from the house. You could see it more easily. Yeah, very good. On that side, that typically would be a beam that would be attached to the roof runner on the top. And in days of old, that's how you would get a second floor crane or with an attached pulley. And you can see the pulley there. The pulley comes from the other side of the local hobby shop where they cater to people making wooden ships. So that is a pulley that's about 1/8 of an inch across. The strap around it is a piece of brass, or no, I think it's a phosphor bronze, 005 phosphor bronze that I simply cut and shaped, and then put through an 040 piece of wire and soldered it to both sides and then colored it. That's a working pulley. Now you might say, well, why go through all the trouble to make a working pulley? Well, I started with all to say it was the pulley that made everything change. Because as you might guess, if you look down into the house on the right, I've maximized the rest of the area in the house. And I could easily fit in there a very small servo that would raise and lower something on the other end of a rope around that little pulley and just animate part of the house with the doors or door opening and then some crate being raised and lowered. So the rest of the house needs to be decorated with crates and rubbish and different things around the front loading dock, not deck. And that necessitated the changes in the house. But nonetheless, you get the idea of with one LED, you can focus on lighting that room on two sides. And that's it.
Fantastic. I can't thank you guys enough. That's really a beautiful presentation for both of you. Thank you so much, Greg. Next, I'd like to turn to Clark Cooney, MMR, who's building the downtown deco model. And Clark, I appreciate you being here this evening, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, let's see if we can get the old PowerPoint up. And I guess we have to hit share screen first. Okay. So this is going to be an introduction to build along with Clark, and we're going to build a downtown deco plaster structure. All right, so let's shed some light on Hydrocal kits. First of all, Downtown Deco is a really neat little company. They're owned by a gentleman named Randy Peacock, and many years ago, we did a project in Modeling with the Masters, building one of these, and I built several of them since. So I'm quite familiar with this kit. And what we're going to do is the first timer bar. And this is a great little kit. Everybody will have space for it on your layout. So now this is not a laser kit. Everybody, we've done some laser kits in this, and we're going to be doing a bar mills kit as well. This is a Hydrocal kit. Now, Hydrocal is a plaster, and it's poured into a mold, which Randy has carved the master and spent a lot of time on them, making the molds. And we're going to walk you through the steps to build this great little starter kit. And we will explore sealing plaster, basic assembly of plaster, and learning to paint brick and other masonry items in a hydrocal. So there's no time like the first time for anything that includes building your first hydrocal kit. And this is designed for rank beginners in mind. If you've never really done anything like this is a perfect entryway into to building a plaster kit. And you'll like it because it's only 1.5 by 4 inches in HO. So the kit info, end scale. Now, I haven't been able to confirm when Randy sent me this stuff, he sent me HO and O, but he does have the in the end scale, and I don't see any reason why you can't order it. So those are the numbers, but you'll go to a site and we'll talk about that in the future. As a special to those doing the clinic, Randy has offered to send some extra walls. Basically, he's going to send enough extra walls, and he's going to send another sign thing so that you'll be almost getting, and I say almost because it's not quite a double kit, but you'll almost be getting 2 kits for the price of 1. So here's a suggestion of tools. Now, when I do Modeling with the Masters, I always put this out and say, you know, in order to follow along and fully take part, you strongly suggest to have all the tools that I list. However, you may not always use them. And most of the tools can be found at local hobby shops, hardware stores, or craft stores. Of course, you're at home, so you're going to be able to have most of your tools that you would normally use. If you have any problems, you can always contact me at ccooning@msn.com. So the tools. Well, first we're going to require some glue, Yellow Carpenter's glue, Elmer's white glue, and I don't use 5-minute epoxy. A lot of people do, so that's an option. You'll need some sandpaper, 80 and 2120 grit. You'll need some X-Acto knife with a number 11 blade in it, and you want to have a number of extra blades. And emery boards or sanding sticks work well. 1/8 drill bit with a pin vise, or whatever you can use for that 1/8 drill. You need some 000 steel wool, and we'll talk about why as we build the kit. Assorted flat paint brushes. In Randy's instructions, he says to use a 2-inch. I find that too big, so you'll need at least one 1-inch flat wide brush. Some clamps and a square. Paint suggestions. Well, we're just going to use the cheap acrylic paint, Apple Barrel, Craft Smart, or Ceramic Coat, and whatever you can find in similar colors. I suggest Folk Art Terracotta. It's an orange brick color. There's also another one called Red Brick, which I didn't include in this. A brown, a raw umber, burnt umber, and raw sienna. Flat black, flat white, and a flat red. And a light gray or similar concrete color. Now, one of the real ones I really like is the Woodland Scenics concrete pigment. But whatever you can get, as long as it's a light gray and we can fool with it, that'll be great. Spray cans. Well, we need 1 Krylon matte clear. Yes, you can use testers, you can use whatever, as long as it's a clear matte spray. Now, in Randy's instructions, when you open the kit, it'll say he wants a Krylon matte white. That's a little bit of a change from what I do, and I would suggest you go with the clear, and I'll explain that why as we go through the process of building this. So again, paint samples, even the poly scale and the gray works, or the ceramic coats, or these are the old Delta ceramic coats. So we're just talking the cheap paints. You can buy them at Michael's when they're on sale for like 89 cents. So painting instructions, this is suggestions. You may have a different color scheme that you want to try. That's fine. That's totally up to you. So order info. First of all, to order the kit, please go on the online and go to Downtown Deco. Order your kit by scale and order and pay. And then what you have to do is send Randy an email at downtowndeco@montana.com and say, hey, I'm doing Clark's Clinic, and I'd like the extra set of castings with the kit. and my name is, and what scale you ordered the kit in, and he will make sure he puts it together and you get the extra set. Okay, and the reason for the second email again, you want those extra set of walls with the kit. So the clinic build will start on new tracks March 27th, April 3rd, 10th, and hopefully end on the 14th. So order kits ASAP. It took the mail, I should say, 11 days to get it to me in Canada. So that's not bad considering we have to cross the border. And as soon as by April, I'll be fishing. So get your kits in, and we'll see you on the March the 27th, I think it is. Any questions? Okay, thanks for coming.
Clark, I appreciate this so much. I've often wondered about building these kind of kits. I've never done it myself. So I really think this is going to be something that's interesting, and I appreciate you doing this for us.
Oh, you're welcome. They are neat, really neat kits. There's a lot of detail built into them, and you have to just bring them out with your painting. Now, you don't have to be an artist to make them look good. So bear that in mind if you're like me and not an artiste.
I've heard many people say that. Moving on, I'd like to introduce Martin Breckville, MMR, to talk to us a little bit about scratch building. Martin, welcome.
Good evening. Let me see if I can get my screen to share. What do you know? It worked. Come on. There you go. Oh, gosh. So, scratch building cars. Well, sort of. Part 2, because part 1 was that Simpson kit about a month and a half ago or whatever I did that. And let's see. And wouldn't you know it, it's another Simpson kit. But we're going to do something a little different this time. These are the instructions for a flat car kit. This is what you get, the template. It's either 36 feet or 40 feet. It's actually fairly useful. It's actually really useful to get you started on scratch building because you could just use the template and cut your own wood. There's a list. There's the instructions, 1 through 8. Yeah, well, I love 8. Flip the car over again, install your deck, install miscellaneous hardware. Okay, hardware. You got a hardware list. You got a list because it's not included. You have to go get that yourself with one of these kits, if you can go find one of these kits. But be that as it may, you don't really need to go do one of these kits that badly. This is what you get in the box. That squiggly stuff is some really old monofilament line, which hit the trash can almost immediately because I never used the stuff. I never liked the way it looks. The interesting thing here is all these boards over here, and there's a whole nother bundle of boards. And when I opened it up, I was wondering, what the heck do I have extra boards for? And I thought, I have extra boards for extra fun. They're there for some reason. It must be for my fun. In this case, let's build 2 cars. So these are the ones that were loose. Those are the ones that were in the bag. That's my own strip wood out of my stock. Make a second car. And you have all the instructions. You just put it all together. But, you know, flat cars are kind of boring. They're kind of limiting. They're interesting to a point. You have to make them more interesting by themselves. So we'll move right along here. Let's install some underbody and truss rods, bolsters. I cast my own bolsters. That's just resin. Every time I buy 2 to 4 pounds of resin to cast things that I want for me, I pull out my bolster molds and maybe make 100 pairs of bolsters. I generally sell about half, and the other half I use pretty quickly just building cars. You just put a train line through. I was feeling really expansive on my budget, and I actually used brass castings for some reason, probably because they were laying there in front of me, and I thought, why not put them to work if they're not going to do any good sitting in the drawer. These are precision scale K brakes and brake hangers. These are the old Berkshire Valley freight car levers, which are discontinued, but they're easy to make out of a little bit of styrene, or in my case, I just cast my own in resin and sand them to whatever thickness I need them to be. Truss rod, the turnbuckles are from Tichy. These clevises are actually Grant Line turnbuckles. And I just cut the ends off, and they make really nice clevises. Take the narrow gauge turnbuckles, cut the end off, run the, what is that? That's 25 thousandths wire, fits right in them very nicely, makes good plumbing. And of course, this is a surgical silk that I use. It's one single piece of surgical silk, through the end, under, over, put the turnbuckle on, out the other end, back, forth, all 4 times. And every time you go through, you pull it tight as you can and stick a nut bolt washer casting in the end to hold it right where you put it. They're not on the queen post yet. They're already under tension. This little brake stirrup is just a piece of square brass stock soldered to a piece of flat stock with a hole drilled in it. Well, it's 3 holes, 4 holes actually. There's one here, one here, one here, one here. That one's where the brake shaft goes through. And I decided, well, I don't want another flat car. I want a gondola. I got to be difficult and say, I don't want one of those. I want one of these instead. So some more strip wood out of the box. These are, I think, 3x16s in O scale. And I think these are, I don't even know what size they are. They're around 4x4, but they may be 3x3s. And lots of NBW castings. I buy a lot of castings from Tichy. I put them on the inside and the outside of the car because if I want it to be empty, well, I'm going to have a bunch of unsightly holes hanging out on the inside of the car, so they need to have something in them. Put some castings in them. There's the flat car pretty much done. And you can see here are the end truss rod bolts. After I trimmed off the surgical silk, there's a ratchet pawl casting. I cast those my own molds out of resin. I want to say that's a precision scale brake wheel, but I'm not sure it is, to be honest. It is brass, however. Some nice old some grab irons in each end. And there's the gondola. And these are actually, I believe, they're the US Hobby or All Nation. They're kind of ancient, but they're nice and brass, and you can find them. And there's a little nut bolt washer in a 3rd hole in every one of them as I went around the car. Lots of fun working with little itty bitty tiny castings, drilling a hole, threading it through. So just assemble it all together, got a gondola. Seemed like a shame to paint the thing, but nice pretty wood. But so you can see how it looks. Came out pretty fair. It's not, the top's not removable in this one. I actually glued it in place, the side boards and ends. Slap some paint on the top. It's just, I don't know what color of gray that is. It's either Louisville and Nashville or Delaware and Hudson. I don't remember. It's whichever bottle of gray looked nice at the time. Really not that important at this point. What's on the bottom is Minwax. I hit everything, all the high points with black, steam black, and the rest is just Minwax dark walnut. You just slap it on. Works fairly well. It's a lot easier to do without the trucks and couplers on, so I can tell you I put those on after I put the stain on. Same story with the gondola. Worked out pretty well. I think these are Grant Line stirrup steps. They were in an unmarked bag I had. I managed to get rid of them doing this project. And you can see at this point, I've also picked up the truss rods and dropped them onto the queen posts. So this car is under real tension. And you can play a nice little tune with these if I actually knew how to tune them and play a tune. Little light weathering, just some chalks and pastels and what have you. I do this probably wrong by most people's accountings. I'm actually using a wet brush and pulling it out and wiping it off on one tissue and scribbling it around and erasing it and using a Q-tip and messing things around until I say, I think I should stop here before I make it worse. And that's generally a good place to stop. Same thing with the gondola, a little light weathering. I'm not even sure what colors these were. There's obviously some rust colors and some browns and blacks. The problem with these cars, though, is if you stop here, even with metal wheel sets in these, they're really, really, really light. I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 ounces light, even in O scale, which means the solution to the problem is to put something on them or in them. So this gives you an opportunity to clean out the miscellaneous castings and kits of things and odds and ends that you had laying around in that shoebox under your bench and make a load or make several loads or get rid of a lot of other stuff. So flat car. I think these were both Crow River kits. So I thought, well, put these together, lock them in with some wood. There actually are pieces of chain holding them down. That's all that's holding these down. In fact, I did not actually glue these 2 items onto the here. The blocking's glued down, but the actual items are not glued down. I sort of met in the middle on that. Sort of embracing the John Armstrong paradigm of loads. They aren't glued in place. If your car tips over, the coal does fall out onto the layout. So if these fall over, well, the chain may or may not hold them. Well, I don't want to find out though. But this added more than enough weight because these are all white metal castings. So, and they're kind of low to the car. They're not really high. So the center of gravity is pretty good. I'm not sure they meet NMRA standards, but if I need to add more weight, I'll find something else to add to the top. Okay, the gondola, that got a catch-all collection of just about everything that was left over in the shoebox. I've got, well, there's barrels and drums, and this is actually a fender off a tractor. These are 2 Berkshire Valley coal boxes, a bunch of tools, some gas cans. Not even sure what that is. More tools in the barrel, different tools in that barrel. Milk cans of some sort, a pile of bags. And so you can see there's all kinds of stuff here. Re-railing frog, all kinds of fun stuff. A couple of water bags, an oil can and a lantern, very precariously balanced on the end of the car, so don't hit any bumps on the track. Some tools, a little workstation, a little vise on it. The only thing I've left off of this is a warm body or the semblance of a warm body to give it a little more simulated life. As soon as I find one that's suitable, I'll tack it in there. And that's where we're going to stop and call it at the end. And until I torment you again in the future. So let's see. Okay, there we go. I can stop sharing. And if anybody's got questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Martin, you are a true craftsman. No question about it.
Well, I slog about and flail about a lot, but try to have some fun with it. But the real take-home lesson here, of course, Jim, was, you got a template and instructions. You can build a second car, and you're scratch building it, and it's not that hard. And if you can build a flat car, you can build a gondola. I just showed you. And if you can build either one of those, you can probably build a box car, which means you can probably build a reefer, which means if you put a platform on each end, you can probably build a caboose. And if you put enough holes in the caboose, it's a passenger car. Boy, that's pretty easy. I left out tank cars and hoppers. They're a little funkier.
It's always been my philosophy. You can build a flat car, you can build anything.
Well, that was the take-home message of my article that was back in the NMRA magazine back in 2003, 4, somewhere in there. It's simple exercise. By the way, that if you go find that article, you'll find the first car I ever entered into the contest room at our divisional mini convention back around 2002, 2001, somewhere in there. I'd have to go look it up. That was the very first thing I ever entered into a contest because I thought, well, you know, this is a stupid idea, but I'll do it anyhow. What the heck? It can only hurt a little. You know, what could possibly go wrong? And I got my first merit award. Actually, I got 3 of them that day, and I won the superintendent's plaque too. And I had a module I brought in, which I'd been encouraged to bring because I thought, I used it as an exercise on teaching myself how to build things. And somebody saw it and said, "Oh, you need to enter that." And I'm like, really? Okay, what the heck? And that's what got the superintendent's prize. But it's stored under my layout somewhere, gathering dust if the mice haven't put a nest into it.
Martin, I'm going to look forward to you being back. This is fantastic information that you share with us. I can't thank you enough for being here.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week, but we'll figure it out.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Okay.
Now I'd like to introduce our featured modeler for this evening, Bob Snyder. Bob is retired. He came to me. I found him through the Association of Professional Model Builders. I'm really impressed with this organization, and I truly believe that an awful lot of model railroaders that are coming along in the hobby are developing the skills and could make a career out of being a professional model builder. So Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. I really do appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, I'm very impressed with what I've been seeing. I've learned a lot about model railroading. You know, I had a Markland HO kit when I was very young, and I still have it somewhere, but I don't think it works anymore. The engine's probably dead. But I've always liked miniature stuff, and I've always liked, I built lots of kit bashing stuff when I was like 7. And I'd burn a few, you know, blow up a few plastic models out in the backyard and things like that. But I got interested in model making as a career when there's a class offered, or as a complete AS degree through a local college. And their coursework covered scale architectural models, and some product modeling, you know, like telephones at the time. This is back in '76 when I first saw this. And they also, the big thrust though was piping models for like nuclear power plants, or power, you know, steam power plants of any kind, coal, process piping for refineries and things like that. And so I checked that out and signed up for the class, and we had to do first a scale model of a house. We had to either design the house or find plans and build a model of the house on a 2 by 3 square foot wood base, and do the landscaping and things like that. And we did first white cardboard models, then we did you know, went into our actual model we had to build trees also. You had to have a selection of 5 different kinds of trees on it. And after that, it got into heavy precision type modeling with cutting acrylic on a table saw, mitering the corners of all these pieces and gluing it together so it would be a cube. And you had to have a hole drilled on one side that was plus or minus 5 thousandths from the edge. And, you know, the dimensioning was very, the tolerances were very tight. And then you had to paint it 3 times, 3 different colors on each cube. So you had to split it up each way. And then at that point, that's when I ran my thumb into the table saw. I was the first student in the class to actually get damaged. And I survived that. My thumb is very functional and everything. But that was very traumatic. I got over it though. After that, the next that's be about a year later, we started in on process modeling, the piping, and you could buy all these kits with all this plastistruct H columns and I beams and tank hemispherical tank ends and things like that. You could buy all this stuff, or you could buy this kit to do this a common modeling kit for let's see, three tanks a column, a couple pumps in it, and a pipe raceway. And before I even I finished that class, but then before I started doing all the drafting and engineering classes that go along with it, I was hired out. Got a job at Bechtel Engineering in San Francisco, where I started doing. I was on one project. I was a Hope Creek nuclear power plant. This model was going on concurrently as the build was going on in New Jersey. Model bases, I think there's like 50 model bases that were 2 by 3 foot basic size. And they would stack it up to make, so that they could assemble the whole model. And it would be about 8 feet tall. And it was a 1/2 inch scale to a foot, or 1/2 inch to a 1 foot scale. They did some models that were 3/4 of an inch to a foot. And you imagine how big those would be. After a while, though, you start seeing pipes in your mind or when your dreams, and it got to be kind of boring. So I did that for about 2.5 years, and I decided I wanted to go back and finish my coursework and look at doing other stuff. And about that time, Star Wars came out, and there was an awful lot of movie hype and how the models were built for all these ships and the props and everything. It got me interested in that, but it didn't mean that I was going to get into it, because it's pretty difficult. You basically have to live on the set and make the models, and then they come along and say, "Oh, we're not using that. It's going, we're going in a different direction after you've spent, I don't know, 150 hours on it." But what I did find was a job at a place called the Model Studio in San Jose. And at this time, I'd say it was about 78. About this time, there was a lot of product model going on for the computer industry. We were building complete model sets, full scale, of keyboards with a monitor in the front and a mouse. Maybe the mouse came a little bit later, but there was always some kind of tactile interface thing. We did those. We worked on, and we did about, I'd say, 20 different models a year of just the computer workstations. Sometimes they're computer mainframes, and they're all made out of acrylic plastic or ABS plastic, all from scratch, from stock. Sometimes we'd start off with an inch thick slab of material and machine out vents into it. And if you can imagine looking at your computer, your laptop, or whatever computer you're using right now, if you had to make a model of that, you have all those keys that have to be put in place. And some of them were a lot more sculptural then. Like you think of an IBM Selectric keyboard or a typewriter, they had a lot more shape to them. So we had to make all those buttons or all those keys, and then we had to put rub downs for the graphics on them. Also at that time, we got into hot and heavy with Atari and Coleco and other brands of video games that were popular at the time. And then About 2 years later, it was phones and other communication devices. And then all of a sudden it became medical equipment was really popular. So and we just kind of moved along with this. At this time, rapid prototyping, let's see, came online in about 81, I think, maybe 82. And they were telling us, oh, model makers are going to go, they're going to be extinct after a while. This is just going to take over everything. Well, all it did was give us another tool to work with. We could take the rapid prototype part, but we still had to finish it out and to paint it and make it look like, pretty. So that's been said several times. I've moved jobs from the product model industry. I've worked in automotive, where we did automotive interiors. I helped other people do clay models of the exteriors and things like that. If you can think of, like, you get into a car and you'll see the visors up above, they had to be modeled. The floor consoles, I didn't do any of the dash work, but I did do garage door openers, things like this. And then we got into car seating in that industry. I also, as the automotive industry can be kind of up and down too, so there's always a lot of pressure to perform for that. And we had a lot of car shows that we had enter stuff into. And those were intensive builds where you'd have maybe 10 people working on a project that's going to go into a car show, and you have to worry about people coming in and touching and ripping knobs off and things like that. You have to make it robust. After about, 7 years at that place, in 1997, I left. It became a brewer at a small pub in my town, just because I was so burned out on modeling. And that lasted about a year before it went under due to the business and the people running the restaurant side of it. They didn't really have it together so I made good beer. That was fun. But after that, I had to get back to real work. And so I joined Whirlpool Corporation, where I worked for about 21 years, doing full-size scale, not scale mockups, full-size models of refrigerators, stand mixers, ovens, ranges, dishwashers, all the dishwasher parts inside. That was, if you can think of building a refrigerator, if you open up your refrigerator and look at all the pieces inside of it, sometimes we would build those from scratch, from the frame of the refrigerator, because you can't just go get cheap metal and foam it up like they do. We would have to build the interiors up and glue them together, finish them out. If you're reaching inside a refrigerator and sanding along the inside surface there, because when you light these things up, you'll see all the sanding marks and everything. So all I can say was some of those projects we had spent $200,000 on one refrigerator. We had outsourced to parts. Sometimes it'd be the clear parts, the bins. We'd outsource. Sometimes we'd have 4 or 5 different companies building parts for us, and then they'd all come in, and we had to make sure that they would fit in place. Then you have this model built up. Usually we'd have lighting, LED lighting. We couldn't go too fancy on the lighting because we had to stay with what was, production available. Some of the concept models we did were pushing the envelope on lighting and features inside a refrigerator, but you have this model built up and then it has to get shipped around the country, and you have to worry about, is it going to see temperatures over 200 degrees? Is it going to see temperature down to 0 degrees? You can imagine these models going on the back of a truck across the country to San Diego, over the Rockies and everything like that. Are they going to get there in one piece is it gonna, and then it gets shipped to the next location, which might be in Dallas, Texas, or Florida, or New York City, depending on where they would do either shows or unveilings or public research, where they bring in customers or just general public and say, what do you think of this? Do you like this feature? Do you like any of these features? Or what would you suggest we do different? Some of our models had touch sensors on them for like a control panel. We had to make the control panels on like a washer front that you could actually touch and it would turn on the lights. Usually they wouldn't turn on the motor and rotate, but it would definitely go through lighting features. Some of those were pretty sensitive to touch or atmospheric conditions or whatever. We had issues with that occasionally. But usually the materials we were using were either like rapid prototype parts, but we would machine an awful lot of these pieces from urethane foam of different densities. They would be anywhere from like a 10-pound foam up to a 45-pound foam, which means a cubic block, square foot or cubic foot block. That's the density of it, how much it weighs. Like a 45-pound is a pretty hefty chunk of material. But we would machine these on a slab, 4-inch thick slab on a 5x8 CNC routers, or we had 2 other mills. And we had very nice facility. There was never enough room. We were always pushing things out of the way to do our final assemblies of these products. I can bring up some pictures and try to share my screen on that if, let's see. Oops. I'm a newbie at Zoom, so. Here am I. So can anybody see this interior?
No.
Nope, just you.
Just me. How about that? Can you see that now?
There we go. KitchenAid.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Whirlpool was KitchenAid, Maytag, Gen Air, and a couple other, European brands, Indian brand, Central Asian and Eastern Asian and South America, and also Mexico, and even I think Inglis in Canada. I think that was one of the brands. Here you can see this ring piece right here. That is a dryer front. It's like a ring that goes on a door, and that was machined from a 1.5-inch thick piece of ABS plastic. So it's maybe a 1/4 inch thick, but if it's machined out of a solid, you can imagine how many chips there were. There wasn't much left of the material after we machined that piece out. You can see we have some pretty good lighting in there, nice epoxy floors. This cabinet right here had an excellent selection of screws, things like that. We had work carts like this that we could stack parts on as they were in different phases of construction. We'd have to sand, and we'd use automotive paints, refinish paints, primers and things like that to get everything finished out correctly. And off to the right here, there's a big walk-in spray booth that you could drive a car into, and complete paint mixing bank with all these cans that would be on auto rotate to keep them fresh. I'm going to go to another picture. No, I'll do that. So this was a mock-up it's a standalone kitchen console. It had everything in it. It had refrigeration.
I don't see the new picture.
You don't see that either? Okay.
I don't see the new picture.
See if
I'm
I
still,
can.
I'm still
Okay,
seeing.
so let me walk you through it. Stop sharing. When you hit share this time, when you start sharing,
Yeah.
share the upper left image. The upper left is your desktop. The other ones are applications, and sometimes you share a picture, you only share the one picture. When you open the next one, we don't see it. If you open the upper left screen, that's your desktop, and we'll see what you see. So share, click on the upper left and then share that.
Hmm. Okay, there's my desktop. You see it?
It's taking a second, I think, because of bandwidth. There we go. Yep, we're seeing your
Yeah.
desktop.
Pay no attention to the files on the side. Do you see
There we
this?
go. Yep, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, this was a mock-up that was built. The designers were from our design center in Italy, so we had a lot of cultural communication issues occasionally, but it was a real fun build. These lit bins on the side were the refrigeration bins. Down here, there was access and a dishwasher was here. This is like a large serving table with a cooled center, I don't know, tray. This right here was, I'll show another picture of it soon. There's a dishwasher at this end, and then there was a small cook stove and a sink. And in here, there is a giant wok. And this thing standing up was supposed to be a water curtain to where they would drag the smoke through and the curtain would catch the smoke particles. This is totally, pie in the sky, dreaming stuff like that. Also at the bottom, I had to install, I had fiber optic lighting in there, and in bright conditions, you couldn't see it. So I had to have a neon tube made up for that. And then eventually it was replaced with LED lighting, which was brighter than the neon tube, but it wasn't as nicely blended as the neon was. So this got put up in the office, the CEO's office, for about 2 or 3 years, and then I'm sure it got scrapped somewhere. Let's see the next picture. So there's the detail. This is that giant wok, and that's the column. This whole thing could collapse down. Theoretically, none of it did at the time. It was just a static model. This is some of the equipment that we use. These are 2 RP machines. They're object printers. They're different ages. This one's brand new. It could print in multiple colors and densities. So it could be a flexible material, or it could be a really hard material, or it could be clear. This one would just do clear and grays. They're very high end. They're like, $100,000 and $200,000 machines. Very high resolution on them if you wanted to. Some of the designers would put in a request and they'd make their part and get it, and they'd say, oh, it doesn't fit, so they'd put in the next request the next day and make another part for it, or we'd have to make another part. Be anything from a thimble size to, I think, bigger than a bread box, 200 millimeters, something like that. This right here, this blue and white cabinet is it's a combination CO2 laser, and I'm not sure what the other kind is, but it was you could etch metal, you couldn't cut metal, but you could do lots of other materials, plastics and wood and leather and things like that. So, at first when we got it, we didn't really know what we'd use it for, except one of the guys that recommended it said, you'll use it for everything. Pretty soon we're using it for making just simple fixtures to create proper spacing between objects. It was very handy, and it makes a beautiful, nice acrylic pieces come out with clear edges and everything. It's a very handy machine. This This one is another project that I worked on separately. It was a beer making machine that Whirlpool decided to sponsor. It was kind of like a contest to see who could come up with a business plan. Then my team won, so they gave us money, like $50,000 to carry it to one step, and then we got $3 million to carry it to the next step, which was actual production. And it's called a Vessi. What you see on top here with the bottle is actually the bottling unit that goes with it. And it was one of those things where I got to use my skills for as a model maker and as a brewer. And it was a very fun project that lasted about 2 years. And then let's make it 4 years. And then they decided to sell it off because somebody didn't like that Whirlpool was getting into beer making or alcohol. And another thing here is this is a full scale. It's a cabin. It's 16 feet by 20 feet by 24 feet tall, I think, 2 stories. I cut the timber frame vents and assembled it, and then put the roof on. And then I started doing this, what they call cordwood construction, which is lengths of wood, usually a pine or a cedar, and you'd lay it up with a mortar in the wall there. The logs were 11.5 inches wide. They're usually that wide or 16 inches wide. And it's a very thermodynamic, it holds the heat on the inside and protects it on the outside, and it doesn't rot because the wood can breathe better. It's a cabin that I started about 2000, and it's still not built. And here we are 20 years later. I've got to do the back top 4 feet on the back side. I think that's it about me as far as what I've got going. I'm going to stop sharing. And so being a model maker, as you know, you're always looking for opportunities for new techniques, new materials to use. That's one of the things that the APMM was instrumental on. We meet with vendors at these conferences. We would talk to, I'd talk to 40 different people and come up with new things that I could bring back to the shop and justify my trip out to Seattle, Washington, or something like that. The APMM has a program for students, where they're trying to bring students on board, and we'll mentor, we'll do model making contests for them, scholarships and things like that. Jim, what did you think of this last conference? Was it pretty eye-opening for you, or?
Yeah, it was, no question about it. The people that I have met have been very impressive, and one of the main reasons that I am so enthusiastic about the APMM is because of the mentoring capabilities that I see for modelers coming from that organization. And the other reason is I believe that model railroaders have the talent to become professionals in the organization. So I look at it from both an employment capability standpoint for younger model railroaders, and I look at it as a mentoring proposition for possibly more advanced model railroaders.
Sure. So they might start off with model railroading and then say, well, I've made this kit. Like, I know a lot of you here have kits that you build and sell, or probably you make parts and you made a mold, so you have extra parts, you can sell them off to other people. At this conference, we met quite a few people, young folks that were doing just that. I think at your last New Tracks, you had some pretty interesting guys on that too.
Yeah, we had 3 modelers come and talk about what they do. And that was, I guess, my first step of trying to get the association interested in model railroaders as potential career professional model builders.
Yeah. So I had a 35-year career doing models. You know, I've done okay. I thought I did pretty well at it. Some people will get paid a lot more. They might even go into computer rendering or things like that, and they get paid $10,000 for a rendering, as we heard from my ex-roommate, Jeff there. You know, there's lots of avenues, lots of approaches to model making, and from model making, there's lots of directions to go. I'm just amazed when I go onto YouTube and I see how many people are putting their build on there, and how many people have channels where they're building video game scenes or movie scenes, dioramas and things like that. Everything from real creepy monster stuff to anime kind of things, and you know, it's just amazing what's out there and how much information's out there. As far as in sharing materials, that's another thing that the APMM has brought forth. There were several material vendors at conferences usually, lots of casting materials, the basic materials like Abo Modulum that was put out by Aline. I can remember McCausey Lumber, they're a big supplier of that, which is, you know, again, they're huge, thick slabs, but for somebody that was doing a big build and they wanted to do a topographical representation of a real situation, you could machine the surface of the contours that you wanted and have a very accurate representation of a certain scene. I don't know. I'm guessing at this, but I know you could, because I know a lot of architectural models are based off of the information that they get that match the actual sites that that the contractors or the developers want to use. As far as what, I was thinking about tips and techniques that I do. I've always been a big proponent for being able to break things down if I need to repair it. So I'm always thinking of assembly and disassembly later on down the road. And I like to have double-sided tapes that I can kind of pry pieces off if I need to get back inside things. Another glue I use that I didn't see anybody mention was Goop, which is available in any hardware store. It sets up kind of like a harder rubber cement or like silicone glue. It's what it feels like, but you apply it and it oozes out too far, you can let it dry and rub it off or just peel it off. And it doesn't mar the finish or anything like that. It doesn't permanently damage the surface. So it's easy to disassemble later on if you need to. It's great stuff. It comes in all kinds of, you can buy it from, they call it plumber's goop, whatever. I just get the tube of glue that has the spout on it, that comes with the spout, because some of them don't. The different types of double-sided tape that we used some very thin stuff, and I can't give you any brand names because I retired now, so I don't have access to all the information that I used to. But Dave's Tapes, I think, was one of the companies that we used to buy a lot of double-sided tape from. So there's, and then we used Loctite glues, but we used the commercial variety of Loctite. 701 was a real thin one, and 711 was a thicker, not a gel, but it was a thicker version of it. Then there's stuff called the Black Max, and I think that's number 736, which is like a very tough super glue, and it's black. Sometimes that comes in handy for when you don't want a clear glue joint. You want black, fills in nicely. But it is a very tough glue to use, very durable. And like I said, our models might be seeing 200 degrees or, you know, anywhere from like 0 to 200 degrees temperature ranges. So we had to build for problems like that. So any questions?
Would you recommend a career in model building?
It was, you know, it was a good career for me. I haven't done any models by myself at home since then, because I kind of like got home and it's like, I'm tired of working on precision stuff. I'll go work on my cordwood cabin. But now that I'm retired, I'm thinking, maybe I'll start doing some of that. I was very interested when I first started on doing any kind of scale models. And I do recommend it because I think there are so many avenues. You might start off as a model maker. You might sand parts for 5 years or something like that, or you might do the finishing and the painting and everything like that, assemble it. And you might find that all of a sudden there's an opening in CNC training, so you might start machining those parts. Those get into be some very technical positions with a lot of computer time, and some people love that kind of stuff. I like to make one-off stuff, so I love having CAD available and checking assemblies and things like that with data that we would get in. But I'm not a CNC machinist. I always did good work on the CNC, but I'm not going to sit there and babysit a machine for forever. So there's so many ways you can specialize with model making. You can go into rapid prototyping side of it. You can do the digital manipulation of all the different files that come in, the computer files. It covers a pretty broad spectrum skill sets. You know, you could be a carpenter and get into model making. You could be a furniture maker. I think we had somebody like that. Somebody that does ceramic type stuff might find it interesting to get into model making. Or there's also a whole nother set of engineering prototyping stuff, which is can be very technical and interesting to people. Being working with scientific instruments like Greg Cleese, or yeah, he works for John Hopkins University, and he's in charge of their labs. And some of his multi-million-dollar equipment that he works with is pretty sophisticated, you know, way beyond what I would consider. But it's the range is, you can go several different ways. So there's also doll furniture. You've seen that. Ship models. Well, we also had a tour of the the patent models, patent model museum. They don't use them as much, but there's the people that build these models for doing prove outs of different iterations of prototypes. Like I said, that can be a very technical side. There's a lot to appeal to anybody who likes building things, who likes seeing something go from concept to, you know, either fruition, or whether it's like several different steps along the way, or it's just I made this model, here it is, it's done, you take it and pay me for it. There's people that are self-employed doing this. There are people that work in small job shops that might have 14, 15 employees or something like that, where different skills. And then there's big corporate shops like when I worked at Whirlpool or Johnson Controls or Bechtel Engineering. They employed probably a couple hundred model makers at one time. So yes, I highly recommend model making as a career. And especially if you get to do railroad models, I think that's really cool too. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
What about can you describe what a career with a would happen? I mean, obviously, you got the sort of like the apprentice and then the journeyman and the craftsman. How does that sort of kind of work through someone's career?
Some places offered journey type, the journeyman type stuff. Usually those were more like the tool and die and prototyping machinist positions. We have a guy at Whirlpool, one of our model makers that came in that is proven to be very skilled at anything you throw at him. He was running the lasers and those object machines and also a UV ink printer. And he came from a art class background, nothing related to model making at all. He just came in and we saw his stuff. He saw he was very detail oriented. Asked him about computers, what does he do? And he says, oh, I just jump in and start touching keys and things happen. So it takes somebody with an open mind, willing to experiment, and pressure. There's a lot of pressure sometimes, but they come from all different directions. Like I said, you could be carpenters, as long as your attention to detail is good. If you're a CNC machinist or tool and die maker, you're going to be disappointed, I think, because things are done good enough to get the job done, whereas you're not going to be sitting there polishing one tool for 2 weeks on end. It's a lot faster turnaround and a lot more interesting projects, varied projects to go along. Tool and die is a tough job. So I'm saying that the really high technical detailed stuff is almost too much. You need to be looser than that. If a tool and die guy came into the shop, but he also did furniture at home or rebuilt a camper or something like that, and he had good pictures of it, that's somebody I would consider for a model making position. We have, a lot of women come into this too, because I'm not going to say that they're detail oriented, but they come from maybe a slightly different perspective. And fabric, there's fabric designers that come into, if you want to make a Nike shoe, you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 different types of skill sets on there. You have somebody who does casting, somebody who does sewing, and then somebody who's going to assemble the shoe and maybe a little bit of finishing on it. But they're going to want to be able to put the shoe on and see how it feels generally. So it has to be durable. But those are all model makers, basically. And the APMM, I think, it's the only professional worldwide association right now that's going on that we know of. But there are universities. The ones in the UK seem to be really coming on strong now. There's a couple in the US, Bemidji State and NWTC, Northwest Technical Center, which is in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I think they're still going strong. There might be other colleges that I'm not familiar with, but there are schools to go to for this. And then there are some art schools that will kind of visit model making. People, car designers start off building cars, a scale car, and they might say, I much prefer making the scale model car than actually doing all the artwork, the drawings and everything like that. So they might, I've known a couple that have stayed in the model making side of it rather than go on to a full blown car designer. Is that anything else? That answer it?
This is John Mick. I wonder if you have any comments about model making in either movies or at Disney.
We went on a tour of the Disney studios down in Orlando. They outsource a lot of their modeling and their exhibits and their animatronic stuff. The only stuff that they had going on there were repairs. And we were kind of disappointed to see that. So then, we thought, oh, we're going to get a tour of Disney, and it ended up being the biggest thing was their laundry facility that they showed us. We were kind of, we got to go in the backgrounds of some of the rides and things like that. But I've known a few people who have worked in Los Angeles at the Disney Studios, and they worked on like a big fairgrounds, very detailed with a Ferris wheel and all the different arcade things. And it was a scale model, worked on it for about a year, and it got shelved somewhere. So I know that they probably do some site planning with models, but they're outsourced to other companies for the bigger stuff, the main stuff. One of the other highlights was Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. I didn't get to go on that tour, but they had, if you've been to Ripley's, any of them, I think they have them worldwide. And so they have to copy some of their exhibits. So they might have a drawer full of bones, and they say, well, we'll take this one, make a cast of it, and use it in this exhibit in Europe or something like that. The shrunken heads, they probably made lots of those casts. That was from what I heard, that was a very fun tour. I wish I'd done on more of that. I'm probably digressing now. Movie stuff. I've had friends that worked on, let's see, everything from the Flintstones movies, Howard the Duck, so, some of the Star Wars movies. I've worked on some submarine models very briefly in a movie that was called Alias, not Alias, The Abyss, which, had 3 working submarines that had to be built in scale. They were about 4 feet long. So the mannequins were about the size of a G.I. Joe. And they had to work underwater, and they were radio controlled. So that was a lot of testing and very high powered radio control equipment that the FCC was chasing them down. In residential sections, they had the radar trucks going around trying to pick up their signals. But if you look at those models in the Abyss, that was a real fun project. I wish I was able to continue on, but I was, while my boss was working on some of that stuff, I had to take over all the other projects in the main shop. But there is an awful lot of CGI stuff that's going on in the computer graphics. It's kind of taking over some of scale models in movies, but I still hear that there's quite a bit more going on, or it's still there. We've had a few people come on and talk about how the industry is changing, but they're hanging on, and they've had to look for work outside of the movie industry. So it's a lot of fun to do that, and it sounds interesting, but like I said, you're basically living on the set. You might be making a giant swimming whale and spend months on it, and then it gets used for, I don't know, 20 seconds in a film. You get, you usually get paid for this kind of stuff, but not as fulfilling that I would think it would be. And I don't know if there are any schools for that. I'm sure you could find something in I forget the name of the colleges in LA, but there's a few there that did screen type or acting and also set building and things like that.
Bob, I know that the association offers positions. I've seen some of the positions that have been offered on their bulletin boards and so forth as part of the association. But if a person was interested in trying to break in to become a model builder, you got any suggestions besides the association?
Besides the association, I'd look at local modeling groups, clubs and things like that. If you're trying to get into it, most of you belong to some modeling or railroading group, right? And you bounce ideas off of each other, or you help each other with your build, and then they help you. That's one way to build up a infrastructure, or a friend base that you can talk to, and possibly find more avenues. I don't know if in the trade magazines and the model railroading magazines or the screen magazines, there probably are. I know there are several magazines about just makeup and movie props, and they probably have ads in there. I guess I would say build stuff, take pictures of it, good pictures, build up a portfolio, and start sharing it with friends, family, any acquaintances and things like that, saying, hey, if you know anybody that's looking for something, built up, like a museum. I didn't even go into museum models. There's a ton of those too. A lot of museums will look for people to build a small scale model of say a ship that comes into a port or something. I live in Michigan here. I live in off the Kalamazoo River, and there's lots of interesting little historical societies around this part of the state. Approaching somebody like that, say, hey, do you need a model of the ferry or some kind of famous ship that came into port? I could build that. I'll try to build that. And maybe you have to volunteer your time, but it's a step in that direction. And like I said, you got to take pictures of everything and try to document what you did. And if you had help, make sure that you say, well, this person helped me on this. And you don't want to say, I built the whole thing. And then they say, really? When you're going out for job interviews, you can tell when somebody is overselling themselves. I'm not a really wealth of information on that because I usually just kind of fall into the jobs. And it was usually word of mouth. The only job that I really looked for was when I moved from California out to Michigan. My wife and I decided we liked this area, and so I hit up all the pattern making shops, the tool and die shops, and any manufacturer that might have a model shop. And I just send out brochures to everybody with my resume on it and some photos. And that's it took me about 2 months of looking and interviews to get out here. But if you do a blanket, and it's like sending a book off to a manuscript to be published. You have to send it out many places, and hopefully somebody will send back saying, yeah, we like your book, and they'll publish it.
We have a question from YouTube.
Yes.
Kirk Butcher. Do you have any advice on how to improve the hobby in building a train layout?
Since I'm not a real big model train person or model railroader, I would say I'd talk to you guys first. To do layouts, I was thinking about this earlier. It's like if I was going to build a layout, first you got to think of what space you have and what scale you're working with. And then what do you like? What train eras do you like? Do you want to go several different versions, And layouts, they always got to be, if you look at towns, they got to be on rectilinear layouts generally, but there's always some free form there where if you look at Google Maps, you'll see how some towns are laid out and they're never perfect. Even north, and what they said was true north, and then it varies a little bit. There's one street that goes off 5 degrees from north. You got to have a blend of natural lines and compass lines, and then what do you want to see in there? Do you want to see bridges? Do you want to see heavy freight yard activity? Maybe industry, or you don't want to have a train going through a residential section. That wouldn't look too good. Usually you want something interesting. I hope that helps.
Anybody else have any questions for Bob? Bob, I want to thank you so very much for your time today and for joining us. I really do appreciate it. You really been enlightening about the hobby and particularly about not just the hobby, but the professional aspects of what's involved with being a professional model builder. And I really do appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, thanks. I've learned a lot, and I'll probably be talking to some of you guys at some point when I get this bug up my behind. Okay.
That sounds great. We'll look forward to it. Thanks again so very much. Thank you. So I do want to mention a couple of other things here. Greg Cassidy talked about tonight his build. And remember again, we're having a special time on March the 31st for the people that are building along with Greg and Chris. And this is going to be the My Build for just those modelers. So we encourage you to participate. Chris is graciously offering a kit to the winner of a raffle for the people that attend that special build. And so I hope that you'll put that on your calendar, and I hope that you'll enjoy building the model with Greg. Clark Kooning, you heard him speak tonight about the downtown deco. Bob Farquhar is building the Blair Line structure. He starts his presentations on the 17th of April. Gaylord Gill and Randy Bosler are building the Bar Mills 1 kit. They're also starting their build on April the 17th. Rick and Maureen Hunter are building the Hunter Line 30-foot King Truss Bridge starting May the 22nd. And Bill Davis is going to build one of Steve Milley's rail scale models starting this fall. So I hope that you'll join in and participate with some of those individuals in their building of their models. And I hope you'll also attend the My Build that we're going to have after each one of the buildings is completed. For Saturday, our upcoming show is going to again have Doug Koster and special segments by Rick and Maureen Hunter on their Hunter Line weathering, Andy Kinney on Andy's Op Corner, and again, Paul Thompson on his quick pick of the evening. So thank you so much for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something.